Welcome to Liberation Lens, where stories unfold beyond the headlines and perspective truly matters. History isn't finished, it's unfolding. This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters.
This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters. Today, we begin a journey not into myth, but into memory. A memory buried beneath centuries of conquest, rewritten by colonial pens, and silenced by academic gatekeepers. This is the story of Africa's hidden empire, a legacy of brilliance, sovereignty, and innovation that has been systematically erased from the global imagination. At the heart of this story lies Kemet, ancient Egypt, a civilization of black African origin, whose genius shaped the world long before Europe's rise. But why has this truth been denied? Why has Egypt been severed from its African roots and recast as something foreign, Mediterranean, or even European? This is because, acknowledging Egypt's African identity is to dismantle the very foundations of European supremacy. It is to return power, pride, and historical agency to a continent long portrayed as a passive backdrop to history. This documentary is not just about correcting the record. It's about reclaiming it. Through the voices of African scholars, the wisdom of ancient texts, and the resilience of a people who refuse to forget, we will uncover the truth they fear you'll know. My dear people, Africa was not waiting to be discovered. It was the origin of discovery itself. For greater insights into this introduction, I recommend Runoko Rashidi's 2015 publication titled, Introduction to the Study of Africa's Classical Civilizations, published by the Institute of Karmic Guidance. Now, let's proceed with Egypt, the African Empire. Ancient Egypt was unmistakably, permit me use the adjective black, in this case for precision, clarity, emphasis and understanding. Ancient Egypt was unmistakably black African, in its people, language, and worldview. To put it into perspective, note that black Africa is current-day sub-Saharan Africa. So, Cheikh Anta Diop proved this in his 1974 groundbreaking research, presented at a UNESCO symposium. The symposium was on the peopling of ancient Egypt and the deciphering of the Meroitic script, held in Cairo. At this symposium, Diop introduced anthropological and biochemical evidence. He used melanin dosage tests on Egyptian mummies, linguistic analysis, and cultural parallels to prove Egypt's black African identity. Note that the Nile Valley was not an isolated miracle but part of a broader African civilizational continuum. This included Nubia, Kush, and Aksum. Yet Western academia has long portrayed Egypt as a Mediterranean anomaly, which is a deliberate attempt to sever Africa from its most glorious chapter. For greater insights into this, I recommend that you read Egypt Revisited, by Sertima, IV. It was published in 1989 and in the Journal of African Civilizations. If you didn't know, note from today that small misrepresentations like this have devastating impacts on a people, their culture, and identity. By the way, did you know that science, philosophy, and governance are Africa's gift to the world? Let me explain. Egyptian civilization pioneered medicine, architecture, astronomy, and philosophy. Did you get that? 1.25s Martin Bernal makes some revelations in his 1987 book titled, Black Athena, The Afro-Asiatic Roots of Classical Civilization, Volume 1, The Fabrication of Ancient Greece, 1785 to 1985. This book is published by New Brunswick, New Jersey, Rutgers University Press. In it, Bernal challenges traditional Eurocentric narratives of classical antiquity. He argues for the significant influence of ancient Egyptian and Semitic cultures on ancient Greece. He highlights the fact that the Egyptian Rhind mathematical papyrus, circa 1650 BCE, revealed algebraic reasoning centuries before Pythagoras. His revelation is part of a broader effort to highlight the intellectual achievements of African civilizations, long before the classical Greek era. The ancient Egyptian term Per-Ankh, which translates as the House of Life, functioned as a university and research center. In 2003, Hunwick, J.O. published a volume with Leiden, Bill Publishers. It is titled, Timbuktu and the Songhay Empire, Al-Sadi's Tariq al-Sudan down to 1613, and Other Contemporary Documents. This volume, along with other key documents, illuminate the political, intellectual, and cultural history of the Songhay Empire and the broader West African region. It reveals that Timbuktu's Sankore University housed over 700,000 manuscripts on law, science, and theology, rivaling any European institution of its time. My dear people, this is to let you know that Africa's intellectual legacy is vast, yet rarely acknowledged. Do you know why? It is simply because it disrupts the myth of African backwardness. That is why I want you to know these truths and be proud of yourselves. Yes. We are products of great generations dating back to many centuries. Now, let's look into the colonial erasure. Let's look at how and why Egypt was sort of whitened. Colonial powers systematically whitened Egypt to claim its legacy. How is this? Let me explain. European scholars like Champollion and Petrie reinterpreted evidence to align with racial hierarchies. Hollywood reinforced this myth with whitewashed portrayals of Cleopatra and Ramses. As Edward Said argued in Orientalism, published in 1978, this was not just misrepresentation. It was a political act. To whiten Egypt was to justify colonialism by claiming that civilization itself was European in origin. So, we must rise up with the Pan-African pride. This should explain why restoring Egypt matters. Reclaiming Egypt as African is not just about correcting history. It's about restoring dignity. Pan-African leaders like Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, and Malcolm X invoked Egypt to inspire African unity and pride. In 1995, Théophile Obenga joined the chorus. He published a significant work titled, Egyptian Geometry, Contribution of Ancient Africa to World Mathematics. This book explores how ancient Egyptian mathematical knowledge, particularly in geometry, was not only advanced but also foundational to global mathematical development. He emphasized that reconnecting with Egypt dismantles colonial narratives and empowers African-descended people globally. This reclamation is a form of resistance, a declaration that Africa was, and remains, a cradle of civilization. Therefore, we must continue breaking the chains of narrative to show how knowledge can liberate not just Africa, but the world in general. Given that education is liberation, African scholars like Toyin Falola and Sylvia Serbin advocate rewriting curricula to reflect Africa's true historical role. They assert the fact that colonial education taught Africans to see themselves as inferior. Decolonized education teaches them to break the chains and see themselves as originators. Consequently, the act of relearning Africa's history is not nostalgia. It's a revolutionary act that reclaims power and reshapes the future. Understanding Africa's true history is not just an academic exercise. It dismantles centuries-old lies that underpin modern inequalities. Relearning Africa's true history transforms self-perception and strengthens collective power. That's the power they fear, you'll know. This is because Africa's stolen history was never an accident. It was a strategy. To erase Egypt's African identity was to sever a people from their greatness. To whitewash its legacy was to claim civilization as a European birthright. But truth is resilient. And now, it rises. The pyramids still stand. The manuscripts still speak. The bloodlines of genius still flow through the veins of a continent that refuses to forget. Reclaiming this history is not just about the past. It's about the future. It's about dismantling the lies that uphold global inequality. It's about restoring the pride, power, and purpose that colonialism tried to destroy. As scholar John Henrik Clarke once said, history is not everything, but it is the starting point. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. My people, let's learn from these great words of wisdom. This is Liberation Lens, Perspective Matters. Africa's story is not finished. It is waiting for you to reclaim and rewrite it. And this is your time. Reclaim your story. Rewrite the world. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Liberation Lens for more documentaries that challenge colonial narratives. Reclaim your past. Transform your future.
You have just seen the world through a different lens. Subscribe, comment, share, and help amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Until next time, keep looking deeper. Liberation Lens, Perspective Matters.